I woke to a scene that looked like a snowstorm had swept through hell itself. My house not just draped, but entombed in toilet paper. The front yard a chaotic battlefield of shredded tissue, fluttering like surrender flags in the dawn breeze. My mailbox, my dog's house, even the poor maple tree I'd planted last summer stood wrapped up tight, mummified in a low-budget horror show. And as I stood there, coffee in hand, staring at the wreckage, I knew this wasn't some kid's prank. This was a calculated military-grade assault, a vendetta etched in every methodical streamer. The culprit wasn't a mystery. It was Karen Whitmore, the HOA's self-crowned dictator, the neighborhood's watchdog who'd find me for my garbage can lingering 7 minutes past pickup, measured my lawn with a ruler, and now apparently escalated to petty vandalism because I dared to defy her insane rules. What she didn't know, though, was that I'd installed state-of-the-art motion cameras around my property. Every second of her midnight TP raid caught in glorious 4K. Her shrill battle cries, her minivan of HOA minions, and the glorious moment she tangled her foot in a roll of Charmin and face-planted into my lawn, all preserved for posterity. Sipping my coffee, a slow grin spread across my face. This was going to be fun. Moving here had seemed smart at first. Nice houses, quiet streets, friendly waves from porches, a place for block parties, not HOA feuds. But then Karen appeared, day one, on my porch like a nightmare welcoming committee, clipboard in hand, fake smile too wide, saying, "Welcome, I'm Karen, HOA head. We have strict guidelines, and I hope you'll follow them." I'd barely unpacked when she hit me with a violation. My mailbox shade 0.03% off regulation brown, and I thought she was kidding. She was. Things spiraled fast. A fine for my car tires brushing the grass. A threat over 2 spooky Halloween decorations. Even animal control called because my dog barked twice in a day. So I fought back, painting my house one shade off her approved color, just enough to irk her, and lining my garden with flamingos, each tagged with a name, the leader a giant pink bird dubbed Karen. She lost it, sending a handwritten, single-spaced rant threatening legal eviction, powerless, but she tried anyway. Then came the driveway violation. My truck parked 1 inch over the line, a $150 fine taped to my door the next morning. That's when I knew she'd never stop, so I set up the cameras and they paid off big. Last night, Karen and her HOA warriors crept onto my lawn like suburban commandos, armed with Costco toilet paper packs, not just tossing rolls but engineering chaos. One guy laddered my roof, Karen barking orders like a PTA general. More on the bushes, drape it like it's for sale, get the mailbox, make the tree dramatic. Until she stepped back, snagged a rogue streamer, and crashed face first into the grass, flailing in her own crime scene. I replayed it again and again, gold in my hands, and as I stood in my TP-ravaged yard, neighbors peeking out in horror, I had a choice. Clean up quietly or make this Karen's most humiliating moment. I chose the latter, no question. The sun barely up, an HOA emergency meeting hit inboxes at 7 a.m., Karen's email screaming urgent. Vandalism threatens safety. The irony thick enough to choke on, and I knew she, spin this to play victim. Let her try. The community hall was packed by the time I strolled in, still in pajama pants, the early morning chill clinging to me as I took in the scene. Elderly couples in Sunday best, soccer moms with Starbucks. The retired guy from 3 doors down who glared at cars all day, all buzzing with concern over Karen's urgent email. She stood at the front, blazer crisp like she was about to argue a Supreme Court case, not spin her own crime into a sob story, clutching a stack of papers I'd bet were stuffed with petty violations she'd hoarded for this exact moment. She cleared her throat with theatrical flair, announcing, "As many of you know, our peaceful neighborhood was viciously attacked last night by juvenile delinquency. One homeowner, unnamed, allowed their property to become an eyesore, lowering our street's value." Her voice dripping with the sanctimony of too many garbage can lectures. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned, and I leaned back in my chair, waiting as she pressed on, hand to chest. "As your HOA president, I've investigated this crime. It's my duty to keep us pristine, and I regret to say I've found the culprit." She whirled on me, eyes narrowing, and declared, "Jake Thompson, you're responsible for this disgrace." The room went still, head swiveling my way, and I had to give her credit. She had nerve framing me for her own mess. I stood slowly, stretching like I had nowhere to be, and said, "Interesting theory, Karen. Just one problem," pulling my phone out and hitting play. The video blared to life, crystal clear 4K of her in my yard, barking orders. More on the bushes, drape it like it's for sale. As toilet paper flew, then the slow-motion glory of her foot snagging, her fall, her face meeting grass, looping for effect. A snort from the back broke the silence, then a stifled laugh, and Karen's face drained white as I turned the phone around, grinning. Funny, I don't recall TPing my own house in a pantsuit yelling about for sale signs. Her mouth flapped like a stranded fish, the room erupting, people doubled over, clutching stomachs, even grumpy old Carl wiping tears, and Karen snatched her papers, shrieking, "This is out of context. It was an experiment, a neighborhood watch drill." I pocketed my phone, smirking, training people to commit crimes, bold HOA policy. She spun to the crowd, desperate. "You know me, I've served this community for years. Are you really believing him?" The laughter faded, but the damage stuck. Heads shook, whispers grew, someone muttered, "I knew she was crazy, but this." And Karen gripped the table, fury replacing embarrassment, gears visibly grinding for a way out. A longtime resident, Martha, stood, voice firm. "Karen, this is too far. You've run this HOA like a dictatorship, and now you're caught vandalizing. We need to reconsider your position." Karen's eyes bulged. "You can't be serious." But nods spread, arms folded, the tide turning fast. I twisted the knife, casual as ever. "By the way, this video's gone a little viral. Couple thousand views already, and the internet's quick." She let out a strangled gasp scream, stormed out, shoving past people, and a few clapped as she vanished. The room buzzed, first hushed, then loud neighbors swapping their own Karen horror stories. Fines for 2 modern mailboxes, bans on inflatable Santas for lacking historical integrity. And by meeting's end, they decided. A vote to oust her was set, her reign teetering on collapse. The parking lot air hit my face like a victory lap as I left the community hall, a grin tugging at my lips. Karen's storming exit was sweet, sure, but it wasn't enough. She'd terrorized this neighborhood for years with her iron fist fines and petty power trips, and I wanted a finale to bury her reign for good. She might have thought she could slink away, let the dust settle, maybe even plot a comeback, but I had the ace. Hours of uncut footage from last night, not just the viral clip of her fall, but the full saga. Her sneaking, planning, barking ridiculous orders like a suburban warlord, every second a goldmine of humiliation. I spent the afternoon in my still living room, editing it into a masterpiece. Slow motion of her tumble, zooms on her shouting, make it dramatic. Over the tree, dramatic music swelling, and a freeze frame of her mid-fall stamped, HOA Justice. It was art, and by dusk I'd uploaded it everywhere, watching it ignite online within an hour. Comments rolled in, "This is peak Karen energy. I need this woman's HOA horror novel." And people nationwide shared their own tales of tyrant presidents, news outlets snagging it with headlines like "HOA leader caught in toilet paper scandal." Karen was a meme now, inescapable. Back home, the neighborhood hummed with post-meeting energy. The HOA scheduled a follow-up vote that night, and word spread she wasn't just facing removal but investigation. Her years of fines, thousands of dollars strong, often had no legal basis. Some rules flat out invented. And then there was the missing HOA dues, meant for community upgrades but vanished into thin air. Mrs. Patterson, a silver-haired resident with a grudge, dropped the hammer. Stack of letters Karen had sent, threatening lawsuits over bird feeders, late porch lights, unauthorized flowers, each signed with her loopy, condescending scrawl, and by vote time it wasn't close. Karen was banned from any HOA role citywide, her empire ash. I figured that was it, savoring a beer on my porch, the night cool and quiet until she appeared. Karen at my driveway's edge, no blazer, hair a mess, face red with rage, not shame, shaking as she hissed. "This is your fault." I sipped my beer unfazed. "Which part? The vote, the meme, or you losing your dictatorship?" Her fists clenched, nails digging in, and for a second I thought she'd charge, but she straightened, smoothing her wrinkled blouse like it could salvage her, snarling, "You'll regret this." I nearly laughed. "What, you gonna TP my house again?" Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, stalking off into the dark after a tense, silent standoff. Next morning, I woke to a surprise. My ravaged yard now hosted a sign, professional-grade, bold letters screaming, "Karen's resting place." A monument to HOA insanity, topped with a bronze toilet paper roll gleaming in the sun. I burst out laughing. The neighborhood had spoken, a permanent jab at her downfall. People snapped photos, it became a local gag. Someone sold HOA Karen mugs, t-shirts, keychains, and the story spread beyond our streets, Karen infamous far and wide. She fought it, tried removing the sign, not her land, sued me, no case, spun herself as victim, no takers. But it was over, she moved away, house sold fast, maybe to scandal chasers, and the neighborhood exhaled. The fines stopped, rules eased, and the new HOA head was fair, nothing like her. Peace settled in, my front yard's monument the cherry on top of her defeat. The neighborhood woke to a new normal that morning, the air lighter without Karen's shadow looming over every lawn and mailbox. And I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, staring at the bronze toilet paper monument glinting in the sun, a ridiculous, perfect trophy of her collapse. Neighbors drifted by, some snapping pics with the sign, others just grinning as they passed, and I caught snippets of chatter. Can't believe she's really gone. That video was wild, the scandal still fresh, a story they'd tell for years. My house, still draped in tatters of TP, felt like a battle scar I wasn't in a rush to erase. It was proof I'd outlasted her, and as I sipped my coffee, I figured this was as close to a win as I'd ever need, until my phone buzzed with a group chat alert. Karen's back. My gut tightened, but it wasn't her storming my yard again. Word was she'd spent the night firing off emails to the HOA board, claiming the vote was rigged, her ban illegal, demanding a recount like she could claw her way back from infamy. I smirked. She was nothing if not stubborn. But the neighborhood wasn't biting. The petition to keep her out hit 400 signatures by noon, a brick wall she couldn't scale. I left it alone, heading out to clear some of the TP mess, the monument watching over me like a sentinel, and by afternoon the group chat pinged again. She'd shown up at the HOA office, hair still wild, waving her evidence stack, but the board shut her down cold. Video proof, bylaws, and her own letters sealed her fate. She left, reportedly slamming her car door hard enough to dent it, and that was the last gasp of her reign. I spent the day untangling my maple tree, scraps of tissue fluttering down like confetti, and it hit me how much had shifted. Karen's rules, her fines, her constant hovering all gone, replaced by a quiet I hadn't known I'd missed. A neighbor, Jen from across the street, wandered over with a coffee refill, nodding at the sign. "You started a revolution, Jake. People are actually talking about disbanding the HOA altogether." I laughed, "Wouldn't that be something?" And she grinned, adding, "That monument's staying, though, best thing on the block." By evening, the yard was half cleared, the sun dipping low, and I leaned against my porch rail, watching kids bike past, something Karen would have fined for excessive noise, and felt the weight lift fully. This wasn't just her defeat, it was freedom. The group chat stayed quiet, no more drama, just a photo of her sold house popping up. "New owners seem normal," someone typed, and I figured that was that, her ghost exorcised. Night fell, cool and still, and I sat out front, beer in hand, the monument's bronze roll catching the porch light. It was absurd, sure, but it fit, a permanent middle finger to her tyranny. My dog barked once, a happy yap, not the kind she'd called animal control over, and I scratched his ears, thinking how he'd outlasted her too. The neighborhood felt alive again, not a battlefield, but a place people enjoyed. And as I finished my drink, I realized I'd become a local legend, not for the fight, but for ending it. Karen was gone, her crown melted into that ridiculous statue, and I'd never been happier to sip a beer under a TP-free sky. Morning broke with a crisp edge, the kind that makes you glad to be awake, and I stepped outside to find my yard still half-draped in toilet paper tatters, the bronze monument standing proud amidst the chaos like a bizarre victory flag. Coffee in hand, I surveyed the scene, neighbors waved as they passed, a few snapping pics with Karen's resting place. And one guy, Tom from down the street, called out, "You're a hero, Jake. HOA's scared straight now." I chuckled, sipping my drink, the absurdity of it all settling in. I hadn't planned to be the guy who took down Karen Whitmore, but here I was, and the neighborhood was better for it. The group chat buzzed with updates. Her house's new owners moved in, a quiet couple who'd already waved from their porch, no clipboard in sight, and someone posted, "Think they know they bought the scandal house?" followed by laughing emojis. I didn't care much. Karen was gone, her minivan tyranny a memory, and that was enough, until I saw Jen jogging over, her grin wide, saying, "You here. They're auditing the HOA books. Karen might have pocketed more than we thought." That piqued my interest. Those missing dues, the fines with no receipts, suddenly made sense, and I figured her exit might get messier yet. By noon, I'd cleared most of the teepee from my mailbox and doghouse, the maple tree still a tangled mess, and the monument gleamed as a backdrop. People kept stopping by, some with coffee, others with stories. She fined me for a birdhouse, told me my shutters were too blue, and I realized her rain had touched everyone, a shared scar we were finally laughing off. The audit rumor grew legs. Mrs. Patterson texted the chat. Found $5K unaccounted for Karen's signature all over it, and replies flooded in. Thief. Jail her. The neighborhood's relief turning to outrage. I stayed out of it, brushing my dog as he rolled in the grass, free of her barking complaints, and thought how fitting it'd be if her own greed tripped her up harder than that charm and roll. Afternoon faded to dusk, and I sat on my porch, the monument catching the last light. Jen swung by again, beer in hand, saying, HOA's meeting tomorrow, they might dissolve it if the money's gone, and I nodded. Good riddance, let's just live. She laughed, toasting the air, and we watched the street settle. Kids played, no fines for excessive noise, and I felt the shift. This wasn't Karen's domain anymore, it was ours. Night crept in, stars pricking the sky, and I leaned back, the bronze roll a shadow now. My phone pinged with a news link. Local HOA president embroiled in embezzlement probe, and I smirked, imagining her blazerless raging at lawyers. The chat lit up, karma's real. Bye, Karen. And I let it fade, sipping my beer, the quiet wrapping around me like a reward. My dog flopped beside me, the yard still a mess but mine, and I scratched his ears, thinking how we'd both outlasted her. Her rules, her fines, her insanity, all undone by a 4K lens and a neighborhood fed up. The monument stood as proof, a joke and a warning, and as I finished my drink, I figured this was peace, not just her absence, but the freedom to sit here unbothered under a sky she couldn't control anymore. The next day dawned sharp and bright, sunlight glinting off the bronze toilet paper roll in my yard like it was mocking Karen's memory all over again. And I stepped outside with coffee, the neighborhood humming with a buzz I hadn't felt before. Anticipation, maybe, or just relief finally taking root. My phone pinged early, group chat alive with HOA meeting tonight, dissolution vote. And Jen's text followed, audits confirmed, $7K missing, Karen's prints on every shady receipt. I whistled low, sipping my drink, picturing her scrambling to explain that away. The TP mess was mostly gone now, just a few strands clinging to the maple tree, and the monument stood tall, a local landmark drawing grins from passers-by. One kid even tossed a fake roll at it, laughing as he ran off. I got to work clearing the last bits, my dog bounding around, free of Karen's noise complaints, and neighbors kept swinging by, Tom with a donut. Heard she's lawyering up, and Mrs. Patterson with a smirk. She's done, cops might get involved. The embezzlement news had flipped the script. This wasn't just about her ousting anymore, it was a reckoning, and I couldn't help but grin at the thought of her blazer-clad reign ending in handcuffs. By afternoon, the chat exploded. Photos of old HOA ledgers leaked, showing dues funneled to consulting fees under Karen's name, and a petition to dissolve the HOA hit 500 signatures. People were done, not just with her, but the whole system she'd weaponized. I stayed out of it, brushing my dog on the porch as the sun dipped, the monument casting a long shadow. Jen jogged over, breathless, meeting at 6. They're voting to end it and sue her for the cash, and I nodded, about time, let her pay. She grinned, you coming? And I shrugged, might just watch the fireworks from here, but curiosity tugged. I'd started this, after all. Dusk settled, and I headed to the community hall, slipping in back as it filled. Same crowd, but angrier now, clutching coffee and old fine notices, Karen's absence a void they filled with outrage. The board laid it out. $7,200 gone, fake expenses, her signature everywhere. Then the vote, hands shooting up to dissolve the HOA, a near-unanimous roar, and a second to pursue legal action against her. It was over in 20 minutes, the room erupting in cheers. I slipped out, the night cool against my skin, and walked home under stars, the weight of years lifting. No more rules, no more fines, just a street free to breathe. Back on my porch, beer in hand, the monument glowed under the moonlight, and my phone buzzed. News update. Ex-HOA president faces fraud. The chat lit up. She's toast. Monument party tomorrow? I laughed, sipping my drink, the quiet sinking in deep. Karen's empire was rubble, and we'd built something better on it. My dog flopped beside me, the yard mine again, and I scratched his ears, thinking how that 4K footage hadn't just caught her fall, it had toppled her whole world. The bronze roll stood as proof, a ridiculous crown for a queen who'd lost everything. And as I leaned back, I figured this was the end. Her tyranny dead, the neighborhood alive, and me just a guy with a beer, a dog, and the best damn story on the block. Morning crept in soft and slow, the kind of quiet that feels like a reward after a long fight, and I stepped onto my porch with coffee, the bronze toilet paper monument catching the first light like it was proud of its part in Karen's downfall. The neighborhood felt different, lighter, looser, kids biking past without a fine in sight, neighbors waving instead of whispering about violations, and my yard, mostly TP-free now, basked in the calm, the maple tree shedding its last tissue scraps like a final salute. My phone buzzed, group chat alive with monument party tonight, and a news link. Ex-HOA president charged with fraud embezzlement. And I grinned, sipping my drink, imagining Karen's rage as her blazer-free life unraveled further. Jen texted, "Cops questioned her last night. She's blamming rogue minions," and I laughed, typical Karen, dodging accountability even as the noose tightened. The day stretched easy. I brushed my dog, cleared the final TP from the doghouse, and watched folks drift by, some nodding at the monument, others snapping pics. Tom swung over, donut in hand. "Heard she's selling her minivan, guess crime doesn't pay," and I smirked. Never did for her. By afternoon, the chat buzzed with party plans, potluck at my place, bring food, drinks, and Karen stories. And I figured, why not? The monument deserved a celebration, a proper send-off for her reign. Dusk fell and my yard filled, neighbors with casseroles, beers, kids chasing my dog, someone stringing fairy lights around the bronze roll, turning it into a glowing shrine. Music kicked on, laughter rolled, and people swapped tailies. She fined me for a red door, tried to ban my cat for loitering, each one a brick in the wall she'd built and we'd torn down. Jen raised a beer, shouting, "To Jake and the monument, HOA's dead." And the crowd cheered, clinking bottles, the night alive with a freedom Karen never understand. I leaned against the porch rail, watching it unfold. Mrs. Patterson cornered me, grinning. "Cops found more $10K now, she's cooked," and I whistled. She dug her own grave deep. The party stretched late, stars bright overhead, and as folks trickled out, leaving plates and hugs, I felt the shift settle. This wasn't just her end, it was our start, a neighborhood unyoked. Night deepened, and I sat alone with my dog, beer in hand, the monument's glow fading as the lights dimmed. My phone pinged. A viral clip of Karen's perp walk, blazerless, snarling at cameras, and the chat erupted. "Karma's a roll. Monument's her tombstone." I laughed, sipping my drink, the quiet wrapping tight. She'd tried to rule us, but we'd buried her instead. My dog yawned, flopping beside me, and I scratched his ears, thinking how that 4K lens hadn't just caught her. It had freed us all. The bronze roll stood silent, a joke turned legacy, and I figured this was peace. Not her absence, but this life unbothered, ours again. I finished my beer, the yard still, and glanced at the sign, Karen's resting place, knowing she'd hate it, which made it sweeter. She was gone, her crown melted into that absurd statue, and we'd never let her forget it. The night closed in, cool and calm, and I headed inside, leaving the monument to guard the dark. A reminder of the day we won and she lost everything. The days after the monument party slipped into a rhythm I could live with forever. The neighborhood waking each morning to a quiet that felt like ours. Sunrise painting the lawns, coffee steaming on porches, and my yard free of Karen's shadow, the bronze toilet paper roll standing like a quirky sentinel over it all. My dog bounded out daily, chasing nothing but joy, no animal control threats looming, and neighbors waved, some still grinning at the sign. Karen's resting place. Now a local legend, a photo op for newcomers who'd heard the tale. The group chat slowed, just occasional pings. Karen's court dates next week. Minivan sold, she's broke. And I'd sip my coffee, smirking at how fast her empire crumbled. News kept trickling in, fraud charges stacking up, $10K confirmed stolen, whispers of jail time, and I figured justice didn't get cleaner than that. I spent mornings tending the yard, the maple tree finally bare of TP, and afternoons with my dog, the monument a backdrop to our routine. Jen dropped by once, laughing. "They're nomming a coffee blend after her at the shop, Karen's brew, bitter and overpriced." And I chuckled, tossing my dog a treat, thinking she'd hate that too. The new HOA was gone, dissolved into history, replaced by a loose agreement to just be decent. And it worked. Fines vanished, flamingos stayed, kids biked free. The street breathed easy, a place to live, not a battlefield. Evenings became my ritual, beer on the porch, the bronze roll catching dusk's glow, and I'd watch the stars prick through. My dog flopped beside me, the quiet sinking deep. Tom swung by one night, nodding at the sign. "You're famous now, Jake. People ask about the TP guy," and I shrugged. "Just wanted my yard back," but he grinned. "You got us all back." Corinne's house stayed quiet, new owners planting flowers she'd have banned, and I liked them already. No clipboard, no rules, just neighbors. The chat pinged less, but the story lingered. Someone sold HOA Corinne mugs at the farmer's market. A kid drew the monument in chalk on my driveway, and I let it stay, a badge of the fight we'd won. Night fell cool one evening, and I sat out late, beer in hand, the bronze roll a shadow under moonlight. My phone buzzed, a final news hit. Ex-HOA president pleads guilty, faces 3 years, and the chat erupted. "She's done. Monument toast tonight." I smirked, sipping my drink. She'd tried fighting, suing, spinning, but the 4K truth and her own greed buried her. My dog yawned, curling tighter, and I scratched his ears, thinking how the camera hadn't just caught her fall. It had sparked this, a neighborhood reborn. The sign stood proud, a joke turned triumph, and I wondered where she'd gone, another HOA to terrorize or humbled at last. But I didn't care. She was out, we were free, and my yard was mine. I finished my beer, the air still, and glanced at the monument one last time. Karen's resting place. A crown she'd never reclaim, melted into bronze forever. The street slept, no fines, no tyranny, just peace, and I headed inside, leaving the sign to guard the dark. A reminder of her end, our win, and the day a roll of TP toppled a queen.